Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will tell you about a homeowners association that wants me to join them anyway. I thought moving day would be the last time I'd wrestle anything heavier than a coffee mug for a long while. The house I'd bought, a sun-baked ranch with moss-green shutters and a wraparound porch big enough for a whole brass band, felt like the trophy at the end of a decade-long marathon. I'd pinched pennies through night classes, overtime shifts, and a few too many instant noodle dinners. Also, I could pay in cash and skip the bank's inspection circus. The deed was recorded that Thursday, my name printed in 12-point type on county parchment. By Saturday noon, I was putting up the mailbox and humming a victory tune completely off-key. That's when the car rolled up. It was a beige compact that looked like it had been beige since birth. Out stepped a woman dressed head to toe in pastel linen. She introduced herself, Marigold, and handed me a tri-fold packet with a smile so polished it squeaked. Inside was a welcome to the community letter on letterhead I didn't recognize, followed by 15 pages of single-spaced rules, capped with a signature line and a request for a check made out to something called the Pecan Trails Homeowners Society. I flipped back to the first page. "I'm not part of any homeowners association," I told her, thinking maybe she'd wandered up the wrong driveway. The realtor said this neighborhood tried to form one years ago, but the vote failed. Marigold's smile stayed exactly where it was, like a storefront mannequin. She tapped the packet. "That's a common misunderstanding," she said. "Our board simply never got around to updating the deeds. All newcomers must join. It's mandatory, retroactive, and immediate. Just sign where the highlighter is and we'll be besties before you know it." Mandatory and retroactive are two words that make every paralegal's eye twitch. And I'd done enough freelance paralegal work to know a bluff when I smelled one. "If it's truly mandatory," I replied, "there would be a covenant in my deed." I pulled out my phone and brought up the PDF I kept for safekeeping. No covenants, no restrictions. Just a straightforward transfer of fee simple title. Marigold's eyelid fluttered. "Our treasurer can explain it better," she said, backing toward her beige getaway car. "Expect a follow-up." 2 mornings later, a certified letter arrived. It warned me that unless I signed within 10 business days, the society would revoke the right to occupy the premises. The phrase made me laugh so hard I almost spilled my cereal. You can't evict an owner from their own property without a court order. And you can't get a court order without a valid contract. I was tempted to frame the letter because it was the most creative misuse of legal language I'd seen since an uncle tried to trademark his own birthday. But things got less funny that night. I came home from the hardware store and found a padlock on my side gate, fresh zip ties around both trash bins, and a red sticker slapped across my front door reading, "Notice of Non-Compliance." My stomach did a slow roll. Petty vandalism is bad enough, but anyone bold enough to put a lock on someone else's fence might be bold enough to do worse. I called the sheriff's non-emergency line, filed a property interference report, and installed cameras. 4 on the eaves, 2 on the porch, 1 disguised in the porch light. A coworker named Talon, who moonlights as an amateur locksmith, helped me snap the new lock like it was made of boiled noodles. We sat on the tailgate of his truck afterward, sipping lukewarm root beer while I told him the whole saga. Talon shook his head. "Sounds like they're poking a bear with a plastic fork," he said. The next day was demolition derby. 4 society members, Marigold among them, stood at the end of my driveway holding clipboards and smartphones, filming as I mowed the lawn. Each time I passed with the mower, they scribbled something. When I killed the engine, Marigold announced that my grass height exceeded their 3-inch limit by a 1/4 inch. "You owe a $100 fine," she declared, as though she were a marshal on horseback. I asked where I should mail my invoice for harassment, and the clipboards retreated like a flock of startled pigeons. That evening, I wrote a cease and desist letter citing trespass statutes, defamation, and interference with quiet enjoyment. I sent copies via certified mail to each board officer. The next morning, all 6 letters landed right back in my mailbox marked refused. By noon, the society's website, yes, they had one, featured a banner labeling me a non-compliant occupant. My address was blurred, but the porch decor in the background was unmistakably mine. That's when the messages began. Anonymous notes slid under my door telling me to stop freeloading and pay my fair share. Legally, they were hanging by a thread, but reputationally, they were piling bricks on my back porch. If the neighbors believed their nonsense, my life here would be misery. So I dug deeper. County records showed the society had filed for non-profit status but never completed the paperwork. Their articles of incorporation were stamped inactive 5 years ago. I also found 3 small claims judgments against Marigold personally for unlicensed contracting work. Best of all, a state Supreme Court decision from last year made it crystal clear. Unless a property's deed contains a covenant, a homeowners association cannot force membership after purchase. It was precedent carved in granite. Still, I wanted a slam dunk. I drafted a memo compiling everything: court precedent, county filings, the padlock photos, video of the clipboard brigade, and screenshots of the defaming banner. I scheduled a meeting with an attorney friend, Zeke, who owed me a favor after I located his runaway beagle last Christmas Eve. Zeke read the memo twice, whistled low, and offered to represent me pro bono just for the entertainment value. He suggested a 2-prong approach: seek an injunction for harassment and simultaneously file a declaratory judgment action, asking the court to state that I was not subject to any HOA. We prepared the packets, stamped them, and just before filing, Zeke whispered, "Let's give them one last chance to walk away." We couriered an ultimatum: cease all harassment within 48 hours or see us in court. They responded faster than a microwave burrito, but not in the way we hoped. That night, every single bulb in my porch string lights exploded. Someone had overvolted the line at my breaker box. My security cameras caught 2 figures in hooded sweatshirts fiddling near the meter. The footage was grainy, but one hoodie bore the society's acorn logo in fluorescent thread. The sheriff upgraded my report to criminal mischief, collected the footage, and promised a detective would follow up. At this point, I realized I wasn't just defending my deed. I was standing between these wannabe tin badge overlords and every future homeowner they might bully. The thought steeled my spine. I set alarms on my phone and took to documenting every sound, every shadow, every anonymous note. Sleep came in 2-hour installments, yet beneath the fatigue, a fire grew. They wanted a fight? They'd get one with footnotes. 48 hours passed, no apology, no retreat, only a fresh invoice on pink paper tacked to my door for non-member surcharge, 60 days prepaid. Zeke filed both actions at 9:01 Monday morning. Court dates landed like dominoes. Preliminary hearing for the injunction in 2 weeks. Declaratory judgment conference a month out. The clerk's stamp was still warm when I drove back home and found a notice taped to my windshield. Your right to occupy is hereby terminated. Someone had tried to mimic official legal wording, but the laughable grammar betrayed them. Thereby instead of hereby, tenants instead of tenants. I snapped photos for the evidence pile. The next incident was a step past vandalism straight into violence. My tires were slashed in broad daylight. A neighbor kid named Asher saw 2 adults in garden gloves crouched by my truck, slicing away, then hopping into the beige compact. His mom marched him to my door so he could repeat the story, cheeks flushed with adrenaline. That statement, recorded on my phone, became Exhibit G. The sheriff's office finally assigned Detective Rowan, who recognized Marigold's name from a prior fraud investigation. He requested my full file and assured me they'd connect the dots. Meanwhile, the courthouse became my second home. At the injunction hearing, Marigold strutted in with 2 other board members, each representing themselves. They presented a stack of fines tallying $3,000, claiming I was the aggressor for refusing lawful dues. Zeke calmly handed the judge our packet. When the judge saw the padlock photos and utility tampering video, her eyebrows nearly left orbit. She granted a temporary restraining order effective immediately. The same afternoon, an officer served Marigold at her workplace, an artisan soap boutique, if you can believe it. That should have cooled things, but zealotry seldom recognizes a thermostat. The society's website switched tactics, renaming me Litigious Lenny. My actual name is Lennox, but close enough, and urging residents to avoid contact with the hostile homeowner. It was oddly flattering. They'd retreated from legal threats to playground name-calling. I screen-captured every pixel. The slashed tires made me upgrade all cameras, install motion-sensing floodlights, and buy a decidedly unsuburban air horn that could wake Lazarus. Talon parked his truck in my driveway overnight for a week straight, just to show solidarity. We played chess on the porch, each clang of the pieces echoing like a warning. The neighborhood, for its part, split into 3 camps. Those who ignored the drama, those who whispered support but dared not speak publicly, and the true believers who glared daggers each time I passed. Through all this, an odd alliance formed. Remember Asher, the eyewitness kid? His father, Milo, turned out to be a civil engineer who'd tangled with Marigold years ago when she tried billing him for repainting his own shutters. Milo offered access to a drone equipped with 4K night vision. We mapped flight paths over public airspace, perfectly legal, and captured high-definition footage of late-night meetings in Marigold's backyard where board members passed envelopes and scrawled notes under tiki torches. Nothing explicitly incriminating, but enough to show a pattern of clandestine plotting. When the declaratory judgment hearing arrived, Zeke and I were armed like legal porcupines. Opposite us, the society finally hired counsel, a young attorney who looked like he'd searched HOA lawyer near me and clicked the first ad. He argued that the neighborhood's original developer intended to form an HOA, citing an unsigned draft covenant from 20 years ago. The judge asked if any covenant had ever been recorded. The attorney admitted none had. Game, set, match. She ruled from the bench. I was not and never had been bound to any HOA. She also warned the society that continued harassment could expose them to punitive damages. Outside the courtroom, the society's lawyer tried bargaining. "If you'd just pay a reduced initiation fee," he said, "we could end this today." I pointed to the ruling clutched in his hand. "It ended 30 seconds ago," I replied. I drove home with relief humming in my ears, ready to tuck the judgment under a fridge magnet and finally unpack the last moving box. But the war had one more twist, and it would stretch my patience and my sense of justice to a breaking point. The judgment felt like armor, but armor only matters if the other side obeys the rules of the battlefield. The Pecan Trails board chose guerrilla tactics instead. 3 nights after the ruling, I woke to the drone of heavy machinery. When I rushed outside, half-dressed and groggy, an unmarked tow truck was winching my pickup, slashed tires and all, onto its flatbed. A man in reflective coveralls shoved a flyer into my palm claiming the vehicle violated street-side parking ordinances and was being impounded per HOA guidelines. I hit record on my phone, announced my name and the date, and asked for the tow order. The driver refused, tightening the cable. The whole scene lasted 60 seconds before I dialed 911. The dispatcher stayed on the line while I read her the license plate. Blue and red lights popped onto the street before the truck could roll. The deputy examined my fresh court judgment and informed the driver he had 2 choices: drop the truck and leave or spend the night in a cell for attempted theft. The driver chose option A, muttering that some lady named Mari paid cash. By dawn, my neighbors were gathered on the sidewalks in terry cloth robes, whispering about the spectacle. Milo flew his drone overhead, streaming footage to a laptop propped on my porch table like we were mission control. In high resolution, we watched Marigold pace her living room, phone to ear, gesturing wildly. Detective Rowan arrived mid-morning, coffee in hand. He'd pulled Marigold's rap sheet and learned she'd once pleaded down a charge for forging signatures on a roofing permit. The detective's tone was suddenly crisp. "She's escalating. We're opening a formal investigation for organized harassment." Organized harassment sounded dramatic, but the consequences were real. Rowan requested search warrants for Marigold's home and the society's clubhouse, which was a converted tool shed on a vacant lot. While he wrangled with the judge, I dealt with everyday fallout. Someone subscribed my address to a deluge of junk catalogs, hundreds arriving daily. Kids on bikes sped past shouting freeloader like a new catchphrase. My porch railings were smeared with raw eggs that baked in the sun until they smelled like a sulfur mine. Far uglier were the fake code enforcement notices. Each claimed to be from the city, citing me for unpermitted structure, namely the wraparound porch that had been original to the house since 1974. The notices carried threats of daily fines. They were printed on municipal letterhead, but the city seal was an outdated version phased out years earlier. One call to the actual code office confirmed no citation existed. The clerk asked for copies. Forging municipal documents is a felony. I overnighted them, adding another brick to Marigold's wall of pending trouble. Still, the drip-drip harassment took a toll. I started parking my truck 3 blocks away just to keep it hidden. I staggered errands so I wouldn't return to a vandalized porch after dark. Even Talon's good-natured jokes couldn't hide that his wife worried each night he stood guard with me. I began doubting my dream house, wondering if victory on paper mattered when daily life felt like trench warfare. That's when the silent majority broke its silence. One Sunday afternoon, a knock sounded. I opened the door to see a line of neighbors, 9 adults, some I'd never met. At the front stood Miss Poppy, an 80-year-old retired school counselor whose hydrangeas were legendary. She spoke first. "We're sorry," she said, voice trembling but steady. "We let that woman bully us for years. We were scared of her fines and her gossip. But what she's doing to you is tipping point." Behind her, everyone held envelopes. Inside each was a sworn affidavit describing separate incidents. Marigold forging their signatures on proxy votes, pocketing tree-trimming dues, and retaliating against anyone who questioned fees by singling them out for made-up violations. Mailbox paint colors, Christmas light wattages, grass clipping directions. These statements gave Rowan probable cause within 48 hours. The search warrants landed on a Tuesday so humid the air felt like warm syrup. Police cruisers rolled up to Marigold's house at dawn. News vans weren't far behind. Milo's drone footage had leaked to a local stringer. Cameras caught officers carrying out boxes of financial ledgers, a stack of blank invoices identical to the ones tacked on my door, and a laptop labeled Treasurer. At the clubhouse shed, they wheeled out a paper shredder still plugged in, the bin stuffed with half-destroyed checks. The arrest came that evening. Marigold was booked for felony forgery, misdemeanor vandalism, conspiracy to commit fraud, and criminal mischief. Bail was set high enough to make her artisan soap profits look like tip jar money. 2 board members turned state's evidence within the week. From jail, Marigold tried orchestrating damage control, but her calls were recorded. Rowan heard her instruct a friend to torch the freeloader's shed and rushed a copy to the judge handling my restraining order. The temporary order became permanent, with a 500-yard buffer. She couldn't even step onto the street without risking rearrest. You'd think that's where the story would end. Bad actor in handcuffs, homeowners free to enjoy backyard barbecues in peace. But a final thread remained. All the bogus fines Marigold collected had vanished. The money wasn't in the society's dormant bank account, whose balance wobbled at $32. Rowan suspected a personal pay-friend wallet. But without hard proof, the funds might never be recovered. And restitution mattered, not just to me, but to every neighbor who'd forked over cash under threat. Enter Plotline 2. My old life as a low-level forensic bookkeeper. In college, I'd paid rent by chasing down embezzled petty cash for mom-and-pop stores. With Rowan's blessing, I volunteered to sift the seized ledgers. Zeke supplied a secure office at his firm. Milo deployed the drone again, this time skimming overhead footage of Marigold's property to locate buried USB sticks rumored among board gossip. The ledgers looked like they'd been balanced by a sugar-fueled raccoon, half entries written in fountain pen, the other half in glitter ink gel. Yet patterns emerged. Every bogus fine matched a pay-friend transfer on the same day, always just under $600. The threshold that triggered extra verification. The money bounced through 3 dummy accounts before landing in a 4th belonging to an LLC called Bright Sun Promotions. Bright Sun's registered agent was, you guessed it, Marigold. With that breadcrumb trail, Rowan subpoenaed Payfriend. They produced logs showing transfers totaling $73,000 over 4 years. That figure could put Marigold in prison for a while and, crucially, set the stage for restitution liens against her property. But there was a snag. Bright Sun's bank account balance was near zero. The funds had been laundered into, what? Soap-making supplies? Turns out they went somewhere shinier. Milo's drone footage, zoomed in and stabilized, caught a glint behind Marigold's house. A 20-foot Airstream trailer, polished aluminum, top of the line. DMV records tied it to Bright Sun. The trailer was parked on a leased pad at a lakeside RV resort 20 miles away. Rowan impounded it within 2 days. It appraised at 80+ grand, more than enough to refund every coerced fine after auction fees. Word spread fast. The neighbors who'd once tiptoed around Marigold now gathered like kids at recess. They organized a potluck on my newly scrubbed porch. Fried chicken, coleslaw, Miss Poppy's peach cobbler. Asher took first swing at a piñata shaped like a giant acorn, and candy exploded across the lawn. For the first time since moving in, laughter replaced tension in the twilight air, yet I still needed closure. The HOA shell, though gutted, legally existed. If left in limbo, some future opportunist could revive it and start the cycle anew. Zeke suggested petitioning the county court to dissolve the nonprofit and declare its declaration void in perpetuity. Under state law, any member or affected party can move to wind up a nonprofit if it operates unlawfully. We convened a neighborhood meeting in Milo's driveway. 32 homeowners signed the dissolution petition. The lone abstainer was a reclusive author who communicated only by sticky notes on her mailbox, one of which read, "I neither know nor care what you people do so long as the hydrangeas remain undisturbed." Fair enough. At the dissolution hearing, the judge barely had to think. Fraudulent activity plus member vote plus criminal convictions equaled slam-dunk dissolution. The court appointed a receiver, someone trusted, impartial, and local, to liquidate assets and distribute restitution. Guess who they picked? Miss Poppy. The woman had mediated playground fights for decades. A crooked balance sheet wasn't about to scare her. Under her stewardship, the trailer sold, the fines were refunded with interest, and leftover funds created a small neighborhood beautification grant. The first project replaced the battered community mail kiosk with a cedar structure that actually locked. Residents voted to name it Mailbox 1 in honor of freedom from bogus notices. With the HOA legally composted, my life eased into the quiet routine I'd imagined. Morning coffee on the porch, Sunday chess with Talon, sunset walks where no one hid behind curtains. I repainted the shutters turquoise just because I could, but life rarely leaves a clean bow on top. 6 months later, a civil litigation notice arrived. Marigold, free on bond, had filed a suit from her lawyer's office alleging defamation, emotional distress, and loss of business opportunities due to my slanderous campaign. Zeke nearly choked laughing, but he also warned me not to underestimate a desperate person. If she found a jury sympathetic to her sob story, she might snag nuisance damages or at least drag me through expensive discovery. I wasn't keen on another year rinsing legal sludge. Instead, I looked for leverage. One night, scrolling court dockets, I found Marigold had neglected to appear at a pre-trial compliance hearing for her criminal case. The judge issued a bench warrant but delayed enforcement until the next status date, a courtesy sometimes afforded to non-violent defendants. That meant she had a warrant hanging over her head like a sword on dental floss. Zeke drafted a motion to stay her civil action on grounds that her fugitive status barred her from invoking court process, an old doctrine called fugitive disentitlement. We filed it the same morning the clerk entered the warrant into statewide databases. The motion was granted. Her civil lawsuit froze in place until she surrendered. Her lawyer withdrew, citing irreconcilable differences. Facing jail for bail violation, Marigold turned herself in. At a hearing to reinstate bond, the DA unveiled fresh charges: witness tampering and attempted arson, thanks to those recorded jail calls about torching my shed. The judge revoked bond altogether. She'd await trial in County Orange, not pastel linen. My phone buzzed with texts from neighbors celebrating like their team just won the championship. I felt relief, yes, but also a slight pang. No one starts out wanting to be the neighborhood villain. But we all choose our paths, and Marigold had paved hers with forged checks and broken porch bulbs. That night I hosted a movie screening on the lawn, projector on a white sheet, popcorn in paper sacks. The feature, an old comedy about pesky landlords and rebellious tenants. Laughter rose into the warm air, fireflies blinking approval. As credits rolled, Miss Poppy settled beside me. "Justice doesn't always come fast," she said. "But when it does, it's sweeter than cobbler." And for the first time since the day the beige compact rolled up my driveway, I believed her. Jail slowed Marigold, but it didn't stop the aftershocks she'd loosed on the neighborhood. While she awaited trial, her allies, what few remained, tried salvaging the scraps of their ersatz power. Chief among them was Jasper, the self-styled vice president who'd once measured my grass with a seamstress tape. Jasper had inherited Marigold's beige compact and apparently her taste for shaky paper trails. Within a week, he applied to the county planning board for a community enhancement grant, claiming pecan trails required a publicly funded greenway down the center of our street. The proposal sounded benign until you read the fine print. The path would be deeded to a new civic improvement district with the same board, minus Marigold, holding perpetual authority. Translation: HOA 2.0, now with taxpayer money. I learned about the scheme from Milo, who combs public dockets the way some people scroll social media. The planning board's hearing was scheduled for 10 days out. If no one showed up to oppose, the grant would sail through and every front yard, including mine, would gain a 10-foot easement. Once the district existed, Jasper could levy assessments every time he fancied a new stretch of concrete. The thought of fighting that battle for decades made my molars ache. I called an emergency porch meeting. 25 neighbors arrived, folding chairs clacking like castanets. Talon slapped poster board on my picnic table. drew a timeline, and assigned tasks the way a football coach doles out positions. Milo would prep drone stills showing perfectly walkable sidewalks already in place. Miss Poppy, whose teacher voice could hush hurricanes, would handle the 3-minute public comment slot. My job was compiling a legal brief citing cases that blocked similar land grab districts in other counties, fuel for the board's attorney to chew on if they thought of approving. While we strategized, Detective Rowan kept feeding us crumbs from the criminal side. Marigold's former treasurer, a twitchy gentleman named Curtis, had flipped entirely. He admitted they'd rehearsed scripts for neighborhood meetings, doctored bank statements, and even staged anonymous complaints to create a perception of widespread support. Curtis handed Rowan a thumb drive of archived emails, one chain revealing the grant idea had been Marigold's fallback plan if the forced membership ploy failed. In her words, either they sign up voluntarily or the county paves over their objections. That phrase, once verified, would become Exhibit A in multiple hearings. The night before the planning meeting, my living room looked like a war room. Laptops aglow, half-eaten pizza, highlighters bleeding neon across statutes. Around midnight, fatigue shoved me onto the porch for air. That's when I saw a silhouette at the curb, a figure bending near my mailbox with something metallic. My motion lights snapped on. He bolted. I sprinted barefoot, tackling him 2 yards from the hydrangeas. To my surprise, it was Rufus, another former board member, reeking of sweat and cheap whiskey. In his jacket pocket, a stack of leaflets claiming I was under federal investigation for mail fraud and urging residents to back Jasper's Greenway. The deputy who showed up recognized Rufus right away. He'd handled my slash-tire report months earlier, so Rufus spent the night sobering up in the drunk tank while Detective Rowan tacked witness intimidation onto the ever-lengthening conspiracy file. I slipped the crumpled flyer into my evidence binder. The grass stains on my knees reminded me that vigilance rarely clocks out. I barely slept before the county planning board hearing. Jasper sat up front beside 2 trail consultants in matching polos, ready to pitch a taxpayer-funded greenway that would carve a 10-foot easement across every front yard. Our side crammed the rest of the room. Miss Poppy spoke first, cool and steady. Property rights aren't remodeling projects you can rip out and redo on whim. Milo projected drone photos proving we already had perfectly good sidewalks. I followed with the Bright Sun embezzlement trail, Marigold's pending charges, and Jasper's own fingerprints on the emails. After an icy pause, the chair ruled the application tabled indefinitely. Bureaucratic burial. Even the consultants packed up their sample tiles in awkward silence. That evening, a different envelope waited in my mailbox. A card from Asher, the kid who'd ID'd the tire slashers. He'd drawn a knight swinging a lawnmower sword at a cartoon acorn. Sir Lennox the Lawn Defender, it proclaimed. And for the first time, this mess felt almost worthwhile. Rowan soon discovered Rufus had spread worse lies online, claiming I sold narcotics from my shed. Screenshots, timestamps, and neighbor affidavits turned a civil court defamation claim into a slam dunk. The judge awarded statutory damages and ordered public retractions. Short on cash, Rufus sold his half-restored muscle car. I donated half the proceeds to the Neighborhood Beautification Fund. New saplings now shade the street he once revved down. Marigold refused a plea deal, sure she could charm a jury. Zeke authenticated forged violation notices. Milo's drone footage sailed past defense objections. Curtis, the former treasurer, described shredding checks. I wrapped my testimony in one line. All I wanted was to live peacefully in the house I bought. After 3 hours, the jury found her guilty on nearly every count. The judge handed down 6 years, restitution, and a lifetime ban on handling HOA money. Pastel linen gave way to state-issue khaki as she was let out. The trial changed me. I started attending city council meetings, pushing for clearer HOA laws. A senator's aide turned that push into a bill requiring covenants be recorded before dues can be collected. It passed 39-11 and reporters nicknamed it Sign It or Lose It. Neighbors celebrated with a still warm apple pie. Life finally felt like life instead of siege. Raised beds filled with tomatoes and jalapenos. Talon and I hosted porch chess tournaments, losers fetching lemonade. His sister Ivy came by to return a drill, stayed for coffee, then dinner, then moved in just until her lease ended. Her mugs multiplied in my cabinets while laughter replaced the old echo of padlocks. Jasper completed 200 hours of community service, mostly planting daffodils under Miss Poppy's supervision. and even managed a sheepish grocery store wave that I returned. Mercy is cheaper than lawsuits. The clubhouse shed, stripped to studs, became a pocket park crowned with a turquoise little free library. At the ribbon cutting, the mayor quipped, "From fake authority to free books, every neighborhood should be so lucky." Now, summer evenings mean iced tea on the wraparound porch, cicadas droning, motion lights clicking on for dog walkers rather than trespassers. Tiny metal acorns dangle from every porch, half cautionary tale, half welcome sign. Peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of boundaries everyone agrees to honor. We earned ours, signature by signature, verdict by verdict, and we'll defend them again if another beige compact ever rolls up the street. Friends, thank you. See you soon.